Hello again and welcome to Pearl Magazine. Hong Kong manufacturers have been bracing for higher tariffs proposed by incoming U.S. President Donald Trump. Economists are warning that a renewed U.S.-China trade war will rock the world. Reporter Alice Kahn spoke with U.S. diplomats and analysts about the pressing issues on U.S.-China relations and the outlook of trade between the two countries. Danny Lau is the honorary chairman of the Hong Kong Small and Medium Enterprises Association. His company manufactures paints and aluminum curtain walls in China. Lau exports 1/3 of his products to the U.S. A trade conflict between the U.S. and China has been ongoing since January 2018, when then U.S. President Donald Trump began his first term in office by imposing higher tariffs on Chinese-made products. President Joe Biden's administration kept the tariffs in place.
My product is on the list. The original tariff was only 5.7%. Now, 25% tariff has been added on top. That means our clients need to pay more than 30% on import tariffs. Of course, we are less competitive. Still, some clients are buying from us.
For example, a building in New York. How much did you make before the increase of tariffs?
Our margin was 20%. But now, after the imposition of high tariffs, we'll give a discount to our clients. The margin is only 10%.
U.S. President-elect Donald Trump pledged to impose more than 60% tariffs on China's goods during his presidential campaign. More recently, he said there would be an additional 10% or more increase on all existing levies on his first day in office on goods made in Mexico, Canada, and China. Danny Lau worries Trump will keep his promise if the Sino-U.S. trade conflict intensifies.
If he really imposes 60% plus in tariffs, we can't do the business. The price will be higher than the locally made products. Then the clients will not buy from you.
In 2020, the U.S. also removed Hong Kong's most favored nation trade status. That means all Hong Kong-made products are regarded as made in China. So Hong Kong manufacturers can't enjoy lower tariffs when they export their products to the U.S. He says the U.S. is an important market to him. He is now planning to set up manufacturing lines in other countries. But Danny says it's not easy.
But the cost is very high. Whether you have enough resources, money, manpower. If you go to a new place, an unfamiliar place, then what is their import tariffs?
The volume of trade in goods between the U.S. and China grew rapidly after China's entry into the World Trade Organization in 2001, and the bilateral U.S. trade deficit in goods with China rose to $375.6 billion in 2017. Despite the imposition of tariffs on Chinese goods in 2018, the U.S.-China trade deficit stood at $330 billion last year. Now Hong Kong manufacturers, politicians, and economists are eyeing the Sino-U.S. relations and Donald Trump's actions when he returns to the White House in January. In mid-November, a U.S.-China-Hong Kong forum for diplomats and economists discussed the impact of a trade war and the outlook of Sino-U.S. relations.
China-U.S. cooperation is never a zero-sum game, nor a one-way street where one party gets all the benefits. And over 70,000 American companies are doing business in China, earning a profit of $50 billion annually. In terms of employment, exports to China alone support 930,000 jobs in the United States.
Despite decades of reform and opening, the PRC still discriminates against American businesses and investors. We want to see progress on intellectual property and an end to forced technology transfers, unfair subsidies. That is why President Biden, quite rightly, raised tariffs on Chinese EVs, lithium batteries, and other technologies.
Former U.S. Deputy Assistant Secretary of State specializes in China policy. He was at the forum and told us tension between the two countries may continue.
The structural cause has to do with the rise of China's power, with the growing assertiveness that China has showed in pursuing what it views as its interests. But the broader problem, in my view, is China's economic model, which relies on an excess of savings domestically that is not consumed domestically, and therefore it flows into investment, creates excess capacity, and that capacity is sold abroad. But when China grew to become the world's second biggest economy, that structural problem has started to create problems in every trading partner's politics, including in the U.S.
But he says it's too early to tell the impact of the tariff policy. He says Hong Kong manufacturers shouldn't take the tariffs too literally.
Well, I think there's a question about exactly how literally we should take the 60% tariff question. It's also possible that tariffs are phased in. If the U.S. does nothing, the risk is that a second China shock in the advanced industrial policy areas that the Chinese government is prioritizing could wash over a whole new wave of industries that will be the basis of economic strength for any country in the future.
As some Hong Kong manufacturers are trying to import through other countries, such as Mexico, Rick warned that the U.S. may impose barriers to these countries.
I don't think we should expect that the U.S. will ignore the use of Mexico or the U.S.-Mexico-Canada trade area agreement as a backdoor into the U.S. market. So I think if you view it from the perspective of fairness, the U.S. is neither going to permit overcapacity to flow directly nor through third countries.
I might be wrong.
Former Deputy Assistant Director of the CIA, Dennis Wilder, also focuses on China policy. He's more optimistic about the relations of the two countries. He says Donald Trump wants peace and is a deal maker.
I would tell the Chinese government, don't listen to the rhetoric. Let's watch what Trump does. When you go into a negotiation, you need cards, okay? You need high cards. The tariffs are a card to play. It's a hammer. It says to China, wake up. Something bad is going to happen if you don't negotiate. I think for Trump, the tariffs are a hammer. But the real desire is a deal.
Dennis thinks one solution is that China buy more products from the U.S.
I believe if the Chinese side is willing to negotiate, willing to buy more soybeans, Boeing aircraft, other big American products, that Trump is willing to negotiate.
Economist Stephen Roach says he worries the trade war will lead to a global recession.
It's a negative. You put the global tariffs together with the higher Chinese tariffs and allow for retaliation from China and other countries in the world on the U.S. It will reduce global economic growth by 0.5 to 0.75%. That's a dangerous development that could bring the world very close to the threshold of global recession.
He says that Hong Kong would be badly affected by the trade war.
Anything that says made in China will get hit with tariffs. Trade war is a negative for Hong Kong. It slows Chinese economic growth. It compounds the U.S.-China conflict. Both of those are key factors right now holding back the Hong Kong economy.
We should focus on opportunities that are available to us. A good example is, we can position ourselves as a supply chain management center. Hong Kong professional service providers can consider giving them advisors, financial support, tax advisory consulting work.
Apart from tariffs, Trump also pledged to employ other policies, such as outbound investment restrictions, export controls, and other economic and national security policies. Biden's administration recently restricted U.S. companies from investing in the technology sector in China, Hong Kong, and Macau.
The trade war was already the beginning of a deteriorating Cold War. Decoupling is going on, especially in technology sectors. We have to accept that for cutting-edge sensitive technologies like semiconductors, AI, even robotics, it is very hard to imagine that Americans are going to collaborate with Chinese scientists or entrepreneurs.
But the chairman of Alibaba Group believes the decoupling in the technology sector may not last.
If you look at AI and all this, maybe it'll last maybe the next 5 years. But if you look at over the next 45 years, I think this decoupling is going to reverse.
As Donald Trump returns to the White House in January, politicians from both countries are waiting to see how his team navigate through the risks and challenges ahead. When we come back, how an old-style photo studio is staying alive despite technological advances in photography. Stay with us. Welcome back to Pearl Magazine. Today's smartphones have made just about anyone a good photographer. Technology and beauty apps can make any photo perfect, so all one has to do is point and shoot. But one local photo studio is sticking to the old ways, when photography was an art that required skill and experience when photographing a subject to capture a mood, and how developing a photo by hand can change its look. This studio in Yau Ma Tei opened in 1940. It's one of the few old-style photo studios left in Hong Kong. The current owner, 75-year-old Lam Kwok Shing, has been using film cameras to take photos of his customers for many years.
This is a set of cameras in the photo studio. This long lens can take a half-length portrait. What's beautiful is that the photos are taken through the lens and the photos are sophisticated.
Lam Kwok Shing took over the studio almost 30 years ago. After graduating from high school, he entered the industry and developed film. He joined the studio in the 1970s. In the 1990s, the old owner of the studio immigrated. Lam didn't want the studio to close down, so he took over the business in 1996. He then became a photographer. The decoration and layout haven't changed for decades. Lam wants to keep the sense of nostalgia.
This one is left behind by boss Chim Chim. This is brown, so it will be used as the background. In addition to these, I added some landscape paintings later. Customers don't like landscape paintings. They all prefer the old to the new.
Lam already had a connection to the studio as a child, since his family had brought him here to take family photos. At that time, cameras were rare, and for many people, taking pictures was unforgettable.
In the New Year family photos at the time, everyone combed their hair and stood up straight. It was like a grand event. He should be 6 or 7 years old. He is now 75 years old, which makes the photo more than 60 years old.
However, as digital cameras and smartphones became prevalent, taking photos has become more convenient, and old-style photo studios are slowly disappearing.
The busiest time was summer break for student portraits and New Year family photos. There were 6 to 10 ID photos every day, but not anymore. There are so few customers, sometimes none at all.
Old photos on the wall record the glory days of the studio and capture the memories of countless families. On this day, Mr. and Mrs. Wu have come to the studio to have their photos taken. They've known Lam for more than 10 years. They say that when they were young, they would have their ID photos taken at a studio. Every few years, they would come to Lam's studio and take a group photo as a commemoration.
I feel that, although using film is more expensive, the quality is better. We think everyone has a special feeling and memory when they look at film photographs.
Taking these photos are for commemoration. Last time it was at least 10 years ago. These are for IDs. I feel I look good and beautiful. That is when I was young. Well, people grow old.
Because there's a limit to the number of film negatives, Lam tries to capture the best shots of his guests every time he presses the shutter.
The photographer communicates with the subject. When they are relaxed, you click. They're comfortable, click. If they're satisfied with the photo, you have a sense of accomplishment.
After the shoot is finished, the film is developed and handed over to photomaster Shek Kwai Nam for processing in the darkroom.
The most important tip is to be precise with the colour, because sometimes when photographing men and women, women's makeup will be a little lighter, and it will fade when exposed. It needs to be exposed multiple times. The rate of exposure will depend on experience.
Decades ago, at its peak, the studio had at least 5 people working there daily. Now 2 people are handling the work. Shek learned a lot of photo-taking techniques from Lam.
I'm proud of my job because of the quality achieved for many customers. When they look at the photos, they go, so pretty, so pretty.
While most of the other old-style photo studios have switched to digital cameras, Lam still insists on using film to take photos of his customers.
Film offers sophistication. It brings out light and shades. Digital ones are nice, and you can change, adjust, and modify. But not with film. The photographer must finesse the product.
All types of cameras and different lenses are used just to capture a moment. Kwai Bun, who was born in the 1970s, doesn't just love photography. He also loves making his own cameras. What he designed wasn't any lightweight, easy-to-carry camera, but this giant instant camera.
Tankenstein, 30 × 24 inches. It weighs about 550 pounds, almost 3 meters deep, and is almost 2 meters tall. I applied for the Guinness World Record. I believe it is a world record.
There is an opaque water tank at the bottom of this camera, which is where photo paper is placed. It can be developed instantly.
The most difficult part is not the camera, but the water tank. Because you have to slide a big sheet of paper from the camera to the tank with no exposure to light inside.
Kwai owns a computer animation and advertising company. He likes to take portraits, but feels that the current instant images are relatively small. So he came up with the idea of making a giant instant camera to capture large images.
I feel happy with it. What I love, I can love it more. I want it bigger, because bigger is more impactful.
Kwai Bun started building a homemade camera 2 years ago. In order to create the bigger image he wanted, he taught himself many optical and mechanical principles. The process wasn't easy.
I don't have an engineering background. I used to be a handyman. My goal was to do something nobody else would do. It comes from me being competitive and wanting to win.
A corner of the office has become Kwai's dream workshop. He's assembled 6 different giant instant cameras.
With a big camera, I can instantly take pictures as big as possible.
It can be bigger than the largest Polaroid in history. This is an inventor's dream that I had as a child. I really wanted to be an inventor, so I spent time doing this.
Hi, Frankie, how are you? Oh.
On this day, Kwai has invited his friend Frankie to be his model. He's using this camera, which is designed for indoor photography.
一陣呢，我就想你定咗之後，我話唔好喐啦，咁你要俾我慢慢對焦。
Many cameras can be set to automatic, but Kwai's giant camera requires manual control. Adjusting exposure and focus relies on experience.
The anticipation is after the setup. You get to snap it just once. After 1 or 2 snaps tonight, it turns out different from what you think. Then you become serious.
咁我數3、2、1準備影咯喎，準備望住3、2、1。
After the photo is taken, it's brought to the darkroom for development. Kwai says that since the camera is operated manually, the effect of each shot will be different.
I was worried at first because the new photo box had some light leakage problems. It turned out that yes, there was indeed some blue color. But then I thought, it's actually quite pretty. Many times when the image comes out, the subject will say, I've never seen a one-to-one scale image of myself. It's a soul-to-soul feeling. It's never been felt with other photos.
第一次同你影咧，我諗都2、3年前啦。
差唔多。The difference is outside they take hundreds of photos. The photographer would modify the best-looking ones before giving them to you. But Kwai only takes one or just several. I'm surprised every time because every time he captures my tourist self at a particular moment.
While everyone uses mobile phones to take photos, Kwai hopes to use his own camera to bring about an experience of slow work that makes fine products.
The spirit of photography is you put in a lot of thoughts, think about the different ways. You have to have limited ammunition to do it. In the past, we could slowly appreciate a large photo with all its details, but the mobile phone photography is for sharing on the internet. With such a small screen and you transfer it, a lot of things are lost. I like the new technology in photography very much because it is very powerful. But on the other hand, in another direction, I think traditional photography spirit needs to be preserved because it's so awesome.
That's Pearl Magazine for this week. Join us again, same time next week. Bye for now.